Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's edition of Stop the BS. As you can tell, that is not Connor Burns sitting atop across from me, wherever how you're looking. We welcome in Garrett, who owns the Houston Stressans account on Twitter, TikTok, everything like that. Garrett, welcome to the show, man.
I appreciate it, Ryan. Big fan of what you guys are doing, and it's always fun to talk ball with some fellow Texans fans. So appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man, appreciate you being here, and we're gonna talk some Houston Texans preseason. We're gonna talk about AFC South, maybe some good predictions for as the season goes on for the Texans. A little bit everything NFL wise. So excited to have you on. You want to start by just saying kind of how talk about your accounts so people know about them, the Houston Stressans, and kind of what you do and how you got kind of started.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm born and raised in Houston. I've been a lifelong all Houston sports fan since I could talk. I've always enjoyed, digesting every bit of Houston sports, whether it's an interview, article, watching the games itself. So, and then as far as, consuming content social media wise, specifically X or Twitter, I've always kind of been in the shadows, been like a consumer. And
Yeah,
then, I think earlier last year, late in the year, like I think it was like November to December, I decided to create my own account, aside from my personal account, to actually, get my opinions or hot takes, so to speak, out there.
yeah,
And I didn't really envision it going to where it is now. So it kind of just one of the things that organically happened. And like I mentioned earlier, I've always been passionate about Houston sports. It's just been natural for me. And really, it's just the same stuff that I do and look at and consume. I'm just taking that one extra step now and kind of, clipping interviews and sharing articles to what I think pertinent or important to us fans. So as
absolutely.
it's kind of evolved, I kind of think of myself as like a one-stop shop for all things Houston Texans. But I also, love the Astros and Rockets, but obviously the Texans are the main one. But
Yeah,
yeah, so X is primarily my biggest following. Not numbers wise. I know X is a little bit different as far as followers. I feel like
yeah.
the number may be smaller, but anyhow, so on X, I'm at Texans Commenter. Same thing on TikTok and on YouTube as well. And then on Instagram, it's at Houston Stressans. But I go by Stressans, Houston Stressans. That's the nickname. So I'll tell you how I came up with that. I mean,
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, obviously there was a stretch there where every game it felt like came down to the final minutes or minute, really. And win or lose, it was a stressful experience. And I want to say it might have been the Buccaneers game. It was either the
Yep.
Bucks or I think it was the Bucks game is when I thought of the nickname, the Houston Stressans. And yeah, it's just been catchy and kind of kept it ever since. And obviously, right now, I say we ain't stressing no more. We're more of the,
Yeah.
the Houston blessings. I know I like to say, are you blessing or are you stressing? I would say right now we're definitely blessing. So
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Definitely a stressful season for us Texans fans out there, and whoever's listening out there who are Texans fans as well, I'm sure can relate. Seemed like every game, like you said, I mean, Stroud had to go do his thing, and it was madness. I was always standing up at on the edge of the chair for every game. So well, that's great. Love the background there. Love the stressings and blessings. I always love that on your Twitter. I think that's hilarious. Sometimes we're stressing, but a lot of times we've been blessing recently. But yes, welcome on and love that. So I guess we'll get right to it. Talking about stressings and blessings. Let's talk about training camp so far. Already had the Hall of Fame game. Not sure if you watched the whole thing, how much analysis you did on that. Any takeaways from that or just training camp so far for you?
yeah, I watched the whole thing, and I will say, leading up to it and during, that was the most excited I was for a preseason game I think I've ever been for the Houston Texans.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of our big questions answered as far as roster spots, but I guess the fact that we've all been, more involved this year, knowing we have a legit contender, there was still some intriguing storylines going into this game. But something I was preaching to people, and I think D'Amico said it too, going into the game. Obviously, we were all excited football was back, so we all wanted to see starters or, first off the bench guys
Yeah.
playing. But we do have an extra preseason game in relation to the rest of the league, us
Yeah.
and the Bears playing that game. So with that being said, there was only a handful of players that were really of any significance, in my opinion, that got meaningful snaps. And I guess I can kind of touch on those. But, obviously, I'm sorry, I got a call. I want to make sure, is my headphones still working?
Yeah, you're so good.
Okay, and I heard it. It might die, so I might have to switch mid while this other one's
All
charging. But
good. All good. We're going on the fly. That's all good.
But I mean, yeah, I can talk about the game a lot. So I mean, I guess I can start with the low hanging fruit, the obvious ones. Kalen Bullock was a standout to me. You know, the safety we got out of USC,
Yep.
and what was very encouraging for him was his knock as to why he got drafted as far back as he did was, you know, he wasn't a good player in the run game and as far as tackling. And
Yep.
the things we saw was excellent at the run game and tackling. We saw the big hit he made with the forced fumble. Unfortunately, celebrated too early. Luckily, you know, he learned that lesson early in the preseason. And then I want to say the next play after he had a pass breakup, and then the next play after that, I forget, maybe it's a different order, but there was three
Yeah.
consecutive plays where he had a forced fumble, a PBU, and a great tackle on a run where he actually saved a touchdown, in my opinion. And then after that was a touchdown, which some people thought was him, but it looked like a busted coverage in the nickel in the corner. So Kalen Bullock was awesome to see. There was other guys like obviously Xavier Hutchinson had a great
Yeah.
game. You know, he's someone who's potentially on the bubble for the roster spot with that six wide receiver, a really stacked room. I thought one interesting thing was Kenyon Green and Juice Scruggs starting together.
Yep.
And, you know, D'Amico had talked about it in several press conferences afterwards that it was important to get them together. So you forget O-line, you know, it's a unit, you know, they have to work together, you know, center and the guard working in tandem, and they showed a lot of good things, albeit against backups. But they were mentioned how they were getting to the second level a lot in the run game, which to me that was the one area that we need to improve the most. Specifically, was run blocking, and you know, early on, we're seeing signs of that improving. But I can keep talking about. I don't know if you were going to add to. I don't want to take all the
No,
takeaways away.
no, yeah, perfect. I'll add to that. I didn't get to watch a ton of the game. I was actually on vacation myself, but obviously I've seen highlights and whatnot. Looked at the stat sheets. Xavier Hutchinson, like you mentioned, kind of first guy I really wanted to talk about and talk about that wide receiver room because this is a second year guy, second or third year guy out of Iowa State. I think still has a ton of promise, has been playing super well, like you said, fighting for kind of that fifth, sixth, seventh spot right there. And talking about that wide receiver room, I mean, the depth is just unbelievable. It's got to be top three deepest wide receiver rooms in the entire NFL.
Sure.
So him competing like he did, I think definitely helps. I've heard his camp has been phenomenal. Transitioning kind of over to a slightly different subject, Mechie from Bama, second year, dealt with, the cancer and, seems to be very healthy now, come back strong, has still to me seemed to struggle, especially just straight up pass catching. Seems like his hands are not great. What are your thoughts on kind of John Mechie or how that wide receiver room might shake out?
I guess before that, I would be remiss not to mention. I mean, there was several other players in that game, but Davis Mills was
Yeah.
incredible.
Yes.
Um, I'm someone who always thought he wasn't as bad as what the rest of the fans thought.
Yeah.
But even that being said, he improved significantly in that game. And to me, I think he actually has learned from CJ Stroud because some of the stuff he was doing technique wise, mainly with his base, how wide his base was, allowing him to go through his progressions, and you can kind of see the little shoulder and chest movements. He looked kind of like CJ-esque in that
Yeah.
regard. And obviously Case played well too, but Davis played great. I mean, it's the first time he was able to have the same OC 2 years in a row, so you can definitely tell that he took advantage of that situation with good coaching. But to tail off that, John Mechie in the game, you know, this is an extra game. I haven't watched the All 22 specifically for John Mechie, but obviously people just look at it and see he didn't have any catches and they just assume he had a bad game. That's not really fair to do. And I don't know, I
Yeah.
can't say specifically if he did or not, but I will say as a receiver, you know, you can look like you're not having a good game and it really not be your fault.
Yeah.
Now we could watch the tape and see maybe he didn't get a lot of separation, but throughout camp, you know, you've been seeing highlights of him, you know, beating guys one on one, being explosive, great route
True.
running, endless clips from coaches and players talking about how athletic and fast he is. He even said himself that he's the fastest he's ever been, including college. Um, so, you know, the wide receiver room itself is super stacked. I would say it's by far the deepest in the league
Yep.
as from depth. And then, you know, as far as top three receivers, we got that all the way till eight, nine guys. But typically, NFL rosters, on a 52-man roster, they keep six receivers.
Yeah,
I'm hoping there's potential where we carve out a special extra spot for Ben Skoranek and exclude him from that and make it seven, with him being on pretty much every special team. And then also his Swiss Army knife potential as far as lining up at H-back or fullback or tight end as well as receiver. Um,
absolutely.
so, with, so with that being said, that can maybe help a little bit, but I still can see two to three receivers on our team getting released and getting picked up by other teams at least. But as far as Mechie goes, I've had him as like the shoe in, basically the backup slot receiver behind Diggs this whole time. I don't weigh too much in on the drops. I know there's like a clip in OTAs where it was a drop, and I went over that video. It was a very tough catch. And then
Definitely.
obviously he had the one-on-one the other day, but it's kind of just a victim of the world we live in today. We have access to all this stuff which we never saw before, and then
Yep.
we're all bored all day watching it, and we kind of tend to remember the bad ones more than the good ones. So we'll see how it plays out in the rest of preseason, but I'm optimistic. There's a lot left. And then just one last thing on Mechie to remember
Yeah.
is, I mean, he came off an ACL out of college, and then the dude went through cancer. I
Yep.
mean, and then just because if and when you finish chemo, that doesn't mean you're done. And he said in his interview too, I mean, there's lingering effects for a long time after the fact. So
Absolutely.
um, let's see how it shakes out this preseason and this season before we get a little too pushy on him. Is my take.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there with as consumers of media and even, producing our own media, like you said, we could see two bad clips and be like, oh my gosh, he's having a bad camp. What's happening with him? Whatever. But there's been 13 training camp days. There's been already a preseason game played. We've seen a very minimal amount of what we've seen from John Mechie. I'm so excited for him to be working towards finally fully healthy. Absolute stud, coming out from college, and I'm hoping the best for him. Absolutely hoping the best for him. Hoping to see him shine this year. So hopefully that turns out well and he has a good preseason. So, but circling back to what you said on Mills, I completely agree with you. Davis Mills is obviously, to me, not loved in Houston just because, I mean, such rough days. Our roster was one of the worst it's ever been. And at times, he was very hit or miss and had some bad throws. I mean, just a very bad situation and was dealt some bad cards with Davis Mills. So I completely agree with you. I think he's one of the best backups in the NFL. I feel like maybe,
Agreed.
given the correct chances and given the correct system, he could start somewhere. I don't know how good he'd be, but I definitely think he's one of the best backups in the NFL. And it's very good knowing that we have that behind CJ Stroud,
Mm-hmm.
given, this year he missed 2 to 3 games with a concussion and, last year, obviously, we started Keenum over Mills, which was an interesting decision. But to see Mills progress, like you were talking about with the CJ Stroud ask, it's exciting to see that if needed, it feels like we can trust in him a little bit.
I agree 100%, and that was like a huge revelation. I mean, you mentioned the Keenum decision. That was an interesting one, but I chalked that up to, you know, D'Amico wanting to lean on the defense in that game, and
Yeah,
he felt like he could trust a veteran more to rein it back, rather than a younger guy going out there and trying to prove himself. And that's kind of what happened. It was super conservative, make a couple plays here and there with your feet type thing.
definitely.
But now Mills has definitely improved, and I walked away from that. I know it's one game, small sample size, but feeling much more confident in the fact that if something were to happen to CJ at some point in time, that we could still be a competitor with Mills. And I
Yeah,
totally agree. I mean, he could be starting, in my opinion, for at least two or three teams right now. And then it's funny too, the people that are kind of like the quote unquote haters of Mills are like, oh, let's just trade him for a sixth or fifth round pick. But it's like you say he sucks and he's not good, but then you think we're going to get trade value for him. So it's like, which one is it?
yeah, absolutely.
Um, but to me, there's no value in trading for him. I mean, you need him on your bench. I mean, uh, I say you keep him and Case. To me, it's a great situation. You couldn't ask for a better situation.
Completely agree. I do not think the Texans should trade him away. I think he's very actually valuable, secretly valuable to this team, especially if
Yeah.
Stroud would go down again, like, 2 or 3
Well, you
games like
see
happened
the
this
the
year.
Niners teams that have made these runs over the years, and with the quarterbacks they've done it with, like Garoppolo, and then they've had injuries and they've still competed. So
Yep.
you have to think in that line of thinking.
Absolutely. It's just like any other, position, running back, wide receiver. I mean, it's a next man up mentality. You have to be able to trust that next man up. And it's seen across the league. I think Mills definitely will be able to do that for us if needed. Hopefully it's not needed. It's one of those
Yeah,
situations, but if needed, absolutely. I agree with you.
exactly.
Um, yeah, absolutely. All right here. So camp obviously playing the Steelers on Friday. Starters will start. How much you think they're going to play? We're going to see anything maybe super, super valuable. What are your thoughts on this game coming up on Friday?
Actually, just I don't know if I posted or not, but I saw a clip from Kay Adams with the Up and Adams show. She was at training
Yeah.
camp today, and she asked D'Amico. She kind of prodded a little bit, and he said that CJ would play 1 to 2 drives,
Okay.
and that basically depends on how the first drive goes. So it sounds like if you kind of like, if you have some quick 3 and out or something, maybe it could go 3 drives. But it sounds like hopefully it's kind of like the Mills reps, come out, have a couple great drives, and then be done for the day. And I would imagine most of the starters would be out there with them. I wouldn't think that you'd want to put your star quarterback out there without the people that he'll be playing with. So
Yeah.
I would assume that if he's playing all the big receivers, Nico, Diggs, Tank, they should all be out there with him. All the O linemen, Tunsil maybe is a question mark, but I mean, I
Yeah.
would put him out there. You don't want to get your star quarterback hurt. So, and then for the Steelers, they are Russell Wilson is out, but he's listed as a starter. I know Tomlin said today, but Justin Fields will be playing. So that'll be interesting. And then obviously on defense, it sounds like we'll have starters there too. So I think the biggest thing though is Mixon's been sidelined with, I believe, a quad injury, and it sounds like it's more precautionary than anything. But this is going to give Damian Pierce a start, and this is probably one of the more intriguing storylines of the entire Texans offseason.
For sure.
Damian Pierce as a rookie, electric, and then took a step back, obviously in the zone scheme, which is a different style of running, more vision based, and he's more of a
Yep.
straight line power runner. But we've been hearing all these sound bites about how he's adapted, and supposedly last offseason he was going through something, and they alluded, I believe, D'Amico and Casario and Damian himself, maybe some kind of mental, personal, off the field stuff. They talk about how he's in a clear headspace. So I am super excited to see if what we're hearing matches up with the tape in a live game. And if that's the case, I mean, look out, dude.
Yeah.
Um, so that's going to be super exciting to watch.
Absolutely. I'm glad you pointed that out. Damian Pierce, like you said, coming off that, very iffy second year, electric first year when the team was not very good at all, not a lot of stars on the team whatsoever. Now seems to be in line to potentially be a kickoff returner as well.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like a valuable piece kind of all over. RB2, kick returning can be used in other different places. Completely agree with you. It should be very exciting to see what he can do because man, when that man gets a full head of steam, lowers the shoulder, I mean, not many people can bring him down as we've seen before. So that should be very exciting.
Yeah, and you even see last year. I mean, even last year he showed glimpses. I've been kind of going through the season, reviewing last year's games, and you can see he had the flashes. It's just a matter of, uh, I think knowing the offense is one thing. I mean, so that's part of the struggle too. Is he didn't know the actual offense, but the big thing we're all hung up on, myself in particular, is the vision. Typically, I think you can't learn vision. I think it's something that's innate. You either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
But we will see, man. Like you said, if he is able to figure it out, I mean, he is a force, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Should be exciting to watch. So we've talked a little bit about training camp, talked a little about preseason. I'll ask you one question here and you can give me any insight you have to give and because I'm curious about it. And then we'll kind of talk regular season, kind of more prediction wise and whatnot. But defensive line has gotten interesting. Obviously, you have the defensive rookie of the year and Will Anderson on one edge. You have Daniel Hunter from Minnesota on the other edge, coming off an insane season. Then you look into the interior D line. You get the Nico Autry from the Titans, now suspended 6 games for wrong drug use. And then you kind of dig deeper into that interior D line and you start to kind of question, at least myself, kind of our depth and what we have there. What are your thoughts on the D line overall and interior D line and kind of who those starters will be to, the force to reckon with in the middle?
Yeah, so the Danico Autry news was definitely, not the best news, but I will say our schedule, the first 6 games are very, very winnable and is by far the easiest stretch of 6 games on our schedule. So if there was any time to miss
Yep.
Danico, it would be that time right there. And then also just throughout this offseason, everyone was hyper focused on an interior defensive lineman, which I was initially, and I kind of quickly came off of it. But, you know, us as fans fall in love with the big popular names, but that's not necessarily always the right or correct decision.
Sure.
It sounds like, D'Amico for his defense, also with Caserio and working and assembling the roster, they have a certain type of player they like. And they have, he preaches versatility is a big thing. And, players that can play multiple positions, but also us having, as a defense, a versatile array of skill sets of different types of players. So specifically to that interior defensive line, we have different types. We got Foley, Fadakasi, who's your bigger, normal three tech type. And then we have a myriad of guys that can move inside and outside. But I think when we talk about Autry being out, we all assume that he was a defensive tackle, but he's really hybrid. He was slotted to be basically an edge rusher and then move into the interior on third down on pass rushing down. So when we talk about replacing him for those 6 games, it's not just one player, it's a mix of players just like we
Yeah.
had. So you can have guys on the edge like Derek Barnett, potentially Jerry Hughes can kind of, some of those, second and third string guys on the edge can kind of help relieve his absence there. And then as far as the interior, Mario Edwards is someone who was already having a great camp that can step in to fill the void there. Khalil Davis is someone who is not being talked about enough. He's having a great camp. He had a pretty good year for us last year. And then obviously you got the big Foley, and I'm missing somebody right now. Tim Settle Jr. is another bigger interior defensive lineman that to be able to help in that regard. And then even then, when you go a little further down, Kurt Heinisch might be able to provide some relief there too. So as a whole, I like it, and we have a lot of guys. I know it'll be 8 to 9 is what D'Amico and Nick have said for D line, but I'm confident the D line will be fine. I think it's some of the concerns from fans are worse than what we think.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that analysis. I mean, just yeah, really, you really nailed it there. Don't know quite how much I can add to that because that was great.
Sorry,
But
I tend to be long winded because I literally
no,
think,
yeah,
eat, sleep, breathe, and talk all day. So when I get asked the question, I could talk to you for.
absolutely. Uh-oh, I'm lagging here. Hold on. Uh-oh, come on. All right, there we go. I was lagging there for quite a little second there. That's okay. No,
Very
absolutely.
good.
No need to apologize for the long-winded answer at all. That's why I'm having you on here. That's why I appreciate you being here because these answers are what I want to hear, and hopefully what other Texans fans is really just NFL stuff to BS listeners want to hear, and hopefully your followers and listeners as well.
For
So
sure.
I agree with you. For me, looking at that interior D line, I guess looking at the names, you can kind of be like, but I absolutely have faith in D'Amico. I trust our depth, and obviously having those guys on the outside and having guys like Jerry Hughes and guys already have been in the system a little bit as well. I'm confident in what D'Amico can do with those guys, and it's exciting. It's an exciting time to have also Hunter and Anderson on that D line. It should be absolutely fun to watch because
Yeah.
man,
Steven mentioned them, but I mean, just them two alone is just insane, dude.
it's truly unbelievable.
But
It would be
something to note
crazy.
about them too is their different styles. So Will Anderson's like your younger bull rush type style guy, but Daniil Hunter, I think we aren't really familiar with his game, but like from what I've learned about him, from watching him and listening to other players talk about him, is the one word you hear often about him is unorthodox. So like he's not like your typical just beat you with the spin move or beat you with the bull rush. He has like a really weird way of pass rushing, and it really
Yeah.
is like it throws off left tackles. You're used to facing this one type of guy over and over and over. Now here comes this guy that does all kind of random stuff, and also on top of that, he's fast and strong. So
Yeah.
you throw that in with the other moves that we have with Will Anderson. I mean, how do you game plan? You have to prepare for everything.
Absolutely. Definitely. And you can emphasize the strong. That man is yoked. He is an
Yeah, he's
absolute beast.
he's
So
crazy,
good
man.
luck. Good luck to teams this year. Hopefully both of them stay healthy, obviously. And good luck picking one side or the other because you got the defensive rookie of the year on one side and the guy just had what, 17 and a half sacks last season. So
I want to say 16 and a half. I'm not sure, but yeah, and then wait till Autry gets back in the mix. I mean, golly, dude.
yeah, I mean, pick your poison. It's an exciting time. Definitely an exciting time to look at that D line. Obviously, Watt is missed. Obviously, Watt has been not rumored to come back, but people want him to come back, which is interesting. So I don't know what your take is on that.
I still think he will. I mean, could the stars align any better?
Yep.
And first off, we have to remember the dude like basically retired, not in his prime, obviously, but like he was still productive. I want to say he had double digit sacks, like 12 and a half sacks his last
Hmm.
year. And we forget the reason why he really retired was because he had that heart scare. It wasn't because obviously he had a bunch of injuries. Everyone thinks, oh, he's just beaten up and broken. I'm sure that's part of it. But the real reason why he was kind of shook by that heart injury and having a kid, he was real emotional about it. And I'm pretty sure that was a big reasoning as to why he retired early. I mean, he only played, what, 10, 12 seasons? I mean, he's got some juice left in the tank.
Yeah.
So, and you see him, he's staying in shape, and then you hear the banter back and forth with him and D'Amico. But, ideal situation for me as a Texans fan is have him come back like, week 12, week 13, get two, three, four regular season games in, and then, get one last crack at it. And that's all we need, too. I mean, we don't need him to be an every down guy. And he really, basically the Autry role, and now we have two guys like that where he could be a third down pass rusher on the interior, basically a pass rush specialist. And I mean, that would be electric. And then that's not even mentioning the boost it would have for the city and the fan base. Like that's just
Yep.
a whole nother.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only from my fandom, but I just completely agree with you overall. He doesn't need to come back week 4, even though Autry's out. He needs to come. If he were to do it, it would be later in the season. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
he's not an every down guy anymore. He doesn't need to
Yeah.
be an every guy down anymore.
We don't need that.
Yeah, right. And he would come in. I mean, just the juice, like you said, that he would bring to the city of Houston, I think would be unmatched, completely unmatched. If he comes back, and you start making a playoff run, you're doing your thing, maybe you hopefully make your first AFC championship game. I mean, the stars would just align. So
Exactly.
that's a very exciting thought. I get very, very excited, obviously, thinking about what that could do just for the city, for our team. So that's exciting for sure.
I got goosebumps right now just thinking about
Yeah,
it.
right. I mean, him running out of the tunnel. I mean, just what also he's done for the city of Houston with Hurricane Harvey and just all those different things. I mean, what a great person, a great athlete, and man, I hope he comes back because that would
And
just
that's
be
that's the
awesome.
one thing of his career is he didn't have a championship or even like a playoff run, really. So I mean, even if
Yeah,
he makes an AFC championship game, that would be, putting a good bookend on his career.
completely agree. And like you also mentioned, I mean, he's in phenomenal shape, as you can
Yeah.
tell. I think I don't know if he said it or if just other people are saying it. I mean, what maybe the best shape of his life. Because he
Yeah.
looks just
Well, he's had
ripped.
basically a year and a half off to only work out and not take a beating. So I mean, you would think, and he obviously who he is and his work ethic. He hasn't been sitting on the couch. He's been working his ass off.
Yeah, seriously, man.
But as the
So
as the Texans too, though, I mean, what is the risk? There's really not much of a risk. So I mean, if it pans out where he's not what you think he is, and you just scale back his reps. But I mean, and the chances of that being likely are pretty much slim to none. I mean,
absolutely, absolutely. There's essentially no risk for the Texans. Obviously, all that risk comes from JJ's side, with the family, with the injuries, blah, 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 like you talked about. So it'll be very interesting to see. And obviously, I hope JJ returns home.
yeah,
That'd be
likewise.
good. Just around a month away, exactly, from the first game against the Indianapolis Colts. Let's talk about kind of the season predictions overall, what you're thinking, maybe Texans' overall record, how, realistically, how far they can go. Just a little overview of all that.
Yeah, so I'm very optimistic. I was like a lot of other fans initially, though. Obviously, we had a great year last year. We all know CJ's the guy, and us that follow him closely, like know how good he really is. But I did kind of have in the back of my brain that PTSD as a Texans fan, of kind of being cautiously optimistic, I guess not wanting to overhype and then be let down and be hurt again. And I was actually at the Texans season ticket member event, the
Oh,
State of the
awesome.
Union, and I ran into another Texans influencer, Noah. He's known as AO Texans Nation on Twitter,
Yep.
and he asked me the same question, what I thought, and I was like, honestly, man, like I think we can win the Super Bowl, but I'm like scared to say it. And he
Yeah.
was like, "No, man, screw that. Like, if you believe it, say it." And then ever since then, like I've had a revelation. I was like, you know what? You're right. Like, there's no reason to like hold back. Um, and at that point, like I realized too, like the fears I had of previous teams is not rational at all because this new regime of Texans is nothing like the old one.
Correct.
Obviously, the moment that comes in mind is the Kansas City Chiefs 24-0 in the divisional round, thinking we're about to go to the AFC Championship game against the Titans at home. So basically, me and all my buddies are punching a Super Bowl ticket in our minds. But so that's like what's in the back of our mind. And obviously, some of the Schaub years where it just the bottom fell out. But
Yep.
to me, it boils down to this: D'Amico Ryans is not Bill O'Brien. DJ Stroud is not Deshaun Watson. So I mean, we have two completely different leaders in the two most important positions, head coach and quarterback. The roster is completely different. So with that being said, like I've had zero fear now of saying what I believe. Like I think we can win it all. I think we're legit Super Bowl contenders. And it's also too as a fan to embrace that. Like now you get to like if we do live up to the full potential, and even if it's not a Super Bowl, it's just a decent playoff run, you get to enjoy like every day along the way. Like every day I've been like soaking it all in.
Yeah.
Rather than, if you were trying to like protect yourself, then what if we ended up winning and you look back and like, man, like I'm happy now, but I could have been happy this whole time.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think we can win it all. To me, the absolute minimum, I think, expectation for us is to at least make the AFC Championship game. As a franchise, it'd be our first time. You know, we were close last year. I mean, that loss to Baltimore last year, I think, is really misleading to a lot of people, especially fans that aren't fans of the Texans. You just look at the box score and like, oh, they got dominated. I was at the game, and I mean, at halftime it was tied, and our only touchdown was a punt return by Steven Sims. But
Yep.
and we had Lamar Jackson shook. I mean, I actually even tweeted it out, and I said Lamar Jackson is shook. And then I had to correct it, and it kind of went viral. But um, I mean, people forget like how close that game was, and then like what happened in the second half too was crazy. It wasn't like we had one possession in the second half, and next thing you know, after one possession, it was the fourth quarter, and we were down 14 points.
Yeah.
And it's not like they just it's not like they just came out there and just blew the doors off us. It was these slow, methodical drives. It was they converted several fourth downs, drained the clock, and that was game. One drive in
Yeah.
the second half and it was game. And then obviously we had some injuries. It was very evident in the receiver room without having Tank out there.
For sure.
Um, and then I hate to admit it too, going into that game, everyone kept talking about, away game and the cold weather. It's going to be loud and cold. I thought it wouldn't be a factor. I'm stand corrected. It was a major factor,
Definitely.
especially for a young, inexperienced team. So as bad as that was, the game was still close, and it was still a valuable learning experience for this team along their way, to what will hopefully be a Super Bowl in the next, at least 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So that was valuable in that regard. But it also pointed out to me that if we do want to make a legit run, home field advantage is paramount. But as far as the season goes, and I do think too, like we even played the Ravens close in that first week in week one, but I think they're one of the tougher matchups for us, just the way they're built. In my
For
opinion, they're
sure.
a really good team. They're like typical, this the hardball ball, just like
Yep.
his brother at Michigan. Those teams were built the exact same. Mobile quarterback, obviously Lamar Jackson is better than J.D. McCarthy, but
Yep.
awesome rushing offense, elite defense, elite special teams, ball control, all that stuff. But those teams are kind of tough for us. But anyways, enough on that. I think that our record, I would say, I want to say 13-4 should be our record,
I love
and
that.
that should have us right in the mix potentially. I think 14 wins last year with the number one seed in the AFC, so we'll be in that mix. I would say our absolute floor would be 11 wins. So
Okay.
11 to 13. I say 11 to 14, but I'm gonna say 13 is I think where we'll be. Um, I alluded to it earlier. As far as the schedule goes, the beginning of the schedule is super easy in my opinion. I shouldn't say super easy. It's NFL, but um,
Easier.
exactly. So I think it's super important that we take advantage of that. We shouldn't just say, oh, whatever, it's NFL. Like we need to try and at a maximum in those first 6 to 7 games have 1 to 2 losses, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because after that, it does get tough. And then obviously the big part that's tough that stands out is I call it the gauntlet is those three
Yep.
games in days against three of the best teams in the AFC,
Unbelievable.
Miami, Baltimore, and Kansas City. So And then obviously too, you want to allow yourself some cushion, because things are going to happen, injuries could happen, etc. So we need to take advantage. I think Green Bay is week 7, but really the only tough game I see in those first 6 games is the Bills. But I think the Bills are going to have a tougher year this year.
I agree
I
with you.
We should try and go. Obviously, you want to win every game, but 6-0 is the goal going into that Green Bay game, and that's the real first game that I could see us losing,
Yeah,
and it
for
should be an
sure.
awesome game.
So between 11 and 14, really more kind of maybe 11 and 13
So
wins,
13, yeah.
AFC Championship. I like that. I like that a lot. Going back to what you first started with, saying, like you want to say Super Bowl, but you're a little scared, you're hesitant based off the past. I'm in your exact same boat because when I look at this season, obviously, this is I've been telling, whoever I'm talking to about this coming season, this is, I think, the best roster the Texans have ever had overall. Obviously, the Texans, we've had great defenses, we've had great offenses, but never quite at the exact same time. I know you had the Arian Foster leading rusher, you had Matt Schaub leading passer, you had some guys on the defense as well. Then you had those years with absolute prime JJ Watt with the top 5 unit and whatnot. This to me, through and through, is I think it's the most talented Texans roster I've seen. Maybe I could be wrong, but to me, that's what I'm seeing. Given that though, I am still slightly scared to say, hey man, like the Super Bowl could be ours because I see Patrick Mahomes still in our conference and a young CJ Stroud and a younger D'Amico Ryan still at the helm. So given that though, it's exciting. It's exciting. My prediction, I think, for this year would be dancing around 12. So pretty close to
Mm-hmm.
you. You're saying more probably 13. I'm more probably around 11 or 12. Just given that gauntlet that you talked about. I mean, it's 10 days. Am I wrong? It's 10 days, right?
Yeah, it's 3 games in 10 days.
You could have the three worst football teams playing us in a 10-day span, and I'd still be slightly concerned because 3 games in 10 days should just be illegal. I do not know why that is a thing. It should not be legal. It's unbelievable. And to make them against Miami, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Baltimore Ravens, potentially the three top dogs of the AFC,
Yeah,
depending on how you want to spin it, it's just absolutely cruel. That is unbelievable.
yeah.
So, that's obviously a very hard stretch. And overall, like you said, the start to the season is not very difficult, given that the rest of our season is kind of difficult. You got Detroit, you got Green Bay, you got the gauntlet, like we talked about. I mean, on the road at Indianapolis, start the season, not necessarily a hard game, but not necessarily an easy game. The division can just go any which way it really wants, as it always does in the AFC South. So I got us pinned for around either 11 and 6 or 12 and 5. And if I had to like make a true statement, I would say AFC Championship game and lose. And to who? I'm not sure, either Baltimore or Kansas City, but
Yeah.
obviously I hope we don't lose. So
I like that. I
yeah.
tend to agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. But it should be extremely exciting. It's very, like you said, you got to enjoy it throughout the season because it's very, very exciting to be a fan of the Houston Texans right now.
A part of it too is like the quick come up too. It's like we went from rags to riches, so it's like we're sitting there like, wait, what? Like, are we actually good?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a mental thing as a fan. Like, can I really dive in? But no, I mean, to me it boils down to this: it's D'Amico Ryans and C.J. Stroud, head coach and quarterback, the two most important things for a team to be great. Look at the
Yep.
Chiefs. You got Andy Reid and Mahomes. Um, I am beyond confident in the two of them. As long as we have the two of them, in my opinion, will always be a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last thing I wanted to know about that, like you said, home field advantage. I cannot agree with you more, given that we're from Houston and given that we play in a stadium with a roof on it, and given
Mm-hmm.
that the NFL playoffs is in January, very, very cold, obviously, going to
Yeah,
places like Baltimore, going to places like Kansas City where it's 20 degrees, 30 degrees, nighttime, could bring winds and hell, even snow
yeah,
if
yeah.
possible. I mean, that is for us a very big factor. Definitely. So I think home field advantage this year of all years it would be pivotal for sure.
But the other way, and I talked about this after the season. So like I really looked hard into that Ravens game because I thought they were the best team in the league last year, and they played a terrible game against the Chiefs and still almost beat them. I still can't
True.
believe they lost that game.
Yep.
They had some that Zay Flowers fumble and whatnot, but um, I walked away from that game like, okay, how do we beat this team to make the next step? Obviously home field advantage is one way, but another way to be able to win on the road is to improve our run game. That
Yep.
to me was priority number one, and I thought we did a great job with that. Obviously, by just solely signing Joe Mixon, I think from his production alone, it'll be a huge jump. But you forget last year, I mean, we had a lot of injuries on the O line, so you add Joe Mixon, and then solely from a health standpoint, I know Laramie Tunsil, he is not a great run blocker, but just O line in general. And then you got Kenyon Green, who's shaping up to looks like he may be up to the potential of what we thought of that first round pick. He's somebody who's battled injuries, and I thought we haven't been patient enough with. So I'm confident that he or Kendrick Green, the guy behind him, will at least
Yep.
provide some stability at the guard spot there, left guard, and then center. You got Juice Scruggs back this year, and now
Yep.
Jarrett Patterson can be his backup. And then at right guard, one of the more underrated O linemen in the league, and Shaq Mason. And then now you have
Definitely.
Titus back at his normal position, right
Finally.
tackle. So a lot of people that are like national media pundits, I feel like they don't realize that one, he's been injured, and two, he's been playing out of position.
Yep.
So you factor in Joe Mixon, healthy O line, and then one other factor for the run game to improve, in my opinion, is I kind of did a deep dive. I saw some tweets on it, but I
Yeah.
went and analyzed PFF grades for Shanahan scheme offenses, kind of this decade, like Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, Sean McVay.
Sure.
Basically, when they went to somewhere new that first year, I guess some people don't realize with these zone running scheme, one, just how different it is in the NFL. Most guys, O line and running back included, are just used to just, bully ball, just running straight forward.
Bolton.
But this is
Yep.
more of a technique, you kind of widen to the sidelines, and it's more of a teach type deal, just from the overall scheme. But then also like the technique itself too, like even the blocking, like the hand placements, the foot placement. It's very super technical. So there's a steep learning curve, is what I'm getting at. And so you see a drastic jump in performance. I looked at the PFF run grades overall for O line years 1 to 2 for all these different coordinators, and you saw a pretty significant jump from year to 1 to year 2 solely off of just learning it. And part of it too might be getting guys in your system, and then even more so from year 2 to year 3. So all that to be said, I think running game will help us, in these environments where the weather may be bad or the fans or whatever. And I think it's going to be better. So, and that's something we needed last year too. I mean, you saw how many games that we had basically dominated and just let the team get back in the game because we couldn't
Yep.
just,
Pick the
finish off the
clock.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. The run game, definitely something the Texans needed to improve and improve fast if they really wanted to compete, given that next step. And I agree with you. A healthy Texans O line should be a top 10 unit with Shaq
Yep.
Mason up there in the middle. Juice Scruggs, who's young but had a ton of promise. Obviously, Titus Howard coming off injury, going back to the right tackle position, like you said, is going to be huge. And then the best left tackle in football in Laramie Tunsil. It should be a top 10 unit when healthy, which should be definitely good enough to get it done.
Well, we got depth now too. So I mentioned Kendrick Green from the Steelers. He was kind of a player that was a misfit. He was in
Yeah.
a gap scheme, kind of undersized guy. So now he's in the zone scheme. So he's a good depth piece. You have Jarrett Patterson, who started for us last year. He's now a backup center slash guard. And then we have Blake Fisher, the draft pick out of Notre Dame, who's showing flashes already. So I mean, already across the board, that's every position really, but O line, the depth is a lot better.
Absolutely. I was going to mention Blake Fisher. He had a phenomenal game in that
Yep.
first game against the Bears. I believe zero pressures given up from PFF. I
Yep.
think I saw that. Incredible. From a pure rookie. So it's exciting. All right, we'll move on here. Just kind of a few final things here. AFC, looking at the AFC South, who do you think is the true biggest competitor? Titans, Colts, or Jags to the Texans, and then just AFC overall. Who you got? Top team. Obviously, it might be the Chiefs or the Ravens, which is a fine answer, but I just want your take on that.
AFC South, I'll start from the bottom up. Titans, I think they're in for a long year.
Agreed.
Brian Callahan came from Cincinnati. We don't really know what he is, but I tend to like these younger, innovative, offensive-minded guys. But I think Will Levis is not the guy. I mean, he's one of those
Agreed.
guys that's like a social media quarterback in the sense that like we see a deep pass, like, oh, he's so good. And his first start, he comes out lighting it up. And I feel like people are hung on to that, but you watch the tape after and like, as far as being an actual quarterback, going through progressions, making reads, making good decisions, not very good at that stuff. So
Agreed.
I think they're potentially in for a long year. And then, Callahan's coming in. He didn't draft him. So, he may not be starting later in the year. If they end up doing bad and he wants to kind of see who he can throw in there, he may not be starting, after week 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'd put the Jaguars at third. I think they're criminally overrated. Trevor Lawrence, really. I mean, you know, there's this funny stigma you get on where you're drafted, and the higher you're drafted, as far as like top pick, you're given a longer leash, and the media is like so much quicker to anoint you as good,
Hmm.
as opposed to someone who's drafted late, like a Nico Collins in the third round, who's elite, but people were still like, oh, I don't know. But if he was drafted in the first round, we'd be talking about him like he was Andre Johnson.
Interesting.
So it's
Absolutely.
it's yeah, but it goes both ways. Like the later you get drafted, it takes longer for people to say you're good. The earlier you get drafted, the earlier they say you're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion, is not as good as what they say. I mean, you watch him play. He's like a dual threat quarterback, and I think people forget that he relies on his athletic ability quite a bit, and he did it in Clemson too. So I mean, he uses his legs a lot, but he's not a true pocket passer. He's not going through his read and his progressions. He's quick to leave the pocket to try and use his legs. And when he does, he makes absolutely boneheaded decisions. He'll make terrible passes. He'll trip and fumble the ball. I mean, there's a lot to be said about what CJ Stroud has done as far as being disciplined and doing the small things throughout a game that add up to win a game. Checking it down, throwing it away. Like, it doesn't sound sexy to the fan, but that stuff adds up and makes a difference. He's great at it. Trevor Lawrence, terrible. But then, yeah, so I have second behind us is the Colts. Anthony Richardson, I do think he's kind of overhyped a little bit. It's tough with him. He has played, what, 4 games?
Yeah.
I could definitely see him as a quarterback that's like new and on the scene, and he's one of these new super athletic quarterbacks that's kind of hard to scheme for a little bit. But I think long term, I would not worry about him as a passer. And then you factor in the fact that, injuries. He gets injured all throughout his career at Florida. And then, last year he was injured. And that, to me, that's the double-edged sword of having an athletic quarterback. As an OC, you want to utilize their ability in the running game, but you don't want to do it too much to hurt them, so you can't even use it at all. And I think I saw the quote, it might have been overblown, from Shane Steichen about how he's going to run them a lot. But, I think the Colts are a great team. Steichen is a hell of a coach, but I still think we're, another step or two above the Colts, honestly.
Absolutely.
So,
I agree with you. That would be my order as well. Titans at 4. You bring in L'Jarius Sneed, you bring in Tony Pollard, you bring in Calvin Ridley. I don't care who you bring in. Will Levis at the helm. I'm just truly not a believer. Even if they weren't in our
exactly.
division, and I hate the Titans with my life, but even if the Titans I didn't have that hatred, they weren't in my division. Still wouldn't say that Will Levis is that guy.
Yep.
New head coach. They definitely have holes on their team that I feel
Their
like
O line's
give
not
me.
very good either. Pretty
Absolutely. The
important.
O-line's not great. You lose your best player in Derrick Henry. You pay Calvin Ridley like 24 million,
That
something
was the
like that a
worst
year.
deal
I'm
of the
like,
offseason.
that is, yeah, I was like, that is a extreme overpay. We'll
Yep.
see. I got the Titans probably winning, between, you know, around 5 to 6 games. We'll see.
Yeah.
Probably like 6 games. So I got them at the bottom. Like you said, the Jags never really hit that potential. Trevor Lawrence, for me, make or break year for him. I know he just got paid a
Yep.
ton of money, but just given where the Jaguars have been, first year the
Another
Jaguars were
overpay.
ass. I agree with you. Another overpay. Major, major, major year for Trevor Lawrence in that system,
Yep.
with Doug Peterson. Should be super interesting to see, because I do think Trevor Lawrence is a good quarterback. Maybe not as great as everybody wants him to be. I do think he is good though. Be interesting to see how he does this year in Jacksonville, because if the Jags miss the playoffs this year, I don't know what they're gonna do down there. It's gonna be some angry
I think
fans.
he's just average, but they're hyping up as like elite. So it's like
Yeah,
he's not here, but he's not here, but he's more like here. And he's
yeah,
kind of inconsistent. He'll have games where he looks great and games where he looks bad. It's like
definitely. He has been
consistency
inconsistent, and
matters, man.
yeah, we've been able to kind of blame, the Jags being bad that first year, and then the second year, like they don't really have quite the weapons and whatnot, and he was still playing well. This past year, really didn't have that many excuses. He had some weapons. He has
Yeah.
Travis Etienne. He had a good, relative team around him, and he did not play well. So it is a Huge, huge year for Trevor Lawrence. We'll see, and for the Jags overall. But I agree with you. I have them at 3. The Colts at 2, just purely, I mean, they should be number 2 in the AFC South, in my opinion. Anthony Richardson,
Yeah.
like you said, if he stays healthy, he is a very dynamic player. You saw him against us in what week was that? Week 2 last year,
Yeah.
torched us up as a young buck. Again, we were a different team, but coming in that early and playing that well, it should be interesting. He scares me a little bit, especially when he's healthy. So we'll see. It
Mhm.
should be a good little battle with the Colts, but I think the Texans at 1 also as well, winning between around 12 to 13 games. So I agree with you. It should be very
Yeah.
interesting though, as the AFC South always is. You never know.
Nah, I think we have one of the easier paths to winning. The Chiefs obviously got a pretty easy division too, as it stands right now.
Definitely.
But yeah, as far as like the AFC as a whole, obviously the Chiefs, they're number one. I would put the Ravens at 2, and I would put us right behind the Ravens, and then probably after us, the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins are gonna have a great year, and then Bills to me overrated, but I think Jets are a team that aren't being talked about enough. You know, people act like Aaron Rodgers just forgot how to play football because he hurt himself.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still a great quarterback, and really that defense is so elite. They really don't need much from the offense. So,
True.
um,
True.
but that's kind of
Absolutely.
where I'm at on the AFC as a whole.
Yeah.
But I honestly think that we match up better against the Chiefs than we do the Ravens. As odd as that sounds.
I kind of agree with you because I can't remember the last time. Again, this is a different team, different franchise now than what it's been given in
Mm.
the past. But I really can't remember the last time we've been able to stop a Lamar Jackson type of quarterback. I
Mobile
like
quarterbacks kill us,
mobile
man.
quarterbacks, the dual threat ones.
Last
The
year
Houston
too.
Texans just cannot stop them.
Zach Wilson, dude. I mean, Desmond Ritter last year. I mean, anybody that had any kind of movement, like we get the pressure on them, and then Baker Mayfield, they move out of the pocket a little bit, and I agree. That's a great point. So that's something this year on defense we need to keep an eye on is improving on mobile quarterbacks, containing them.
Absolutely. And for some reason, I'm just a Jets kind of hater. I don't mean to be, but I just like am. I will say their defense is absolutely phenomenal. They have the best defense in the NFL. Offensively, Brees Hall, absolute stud. Top 10 back this year. Garrett Wilson, top 15 wide receiver. I mean, they have an unbelievable amount of talent. Maybe it's just Aaron Rodgers and who he has kind of become now, in his media and all this stuff. I don't know. I kind of like seeing the Jets fail. But I have to humble myself and say they are a very good football team, especially when healthy. So they're definitely a force to reckon with. I agree with you. I think Buffalo falls off a little bit this year. And yeah, I mean, Chiefs 1, Ravens 2, Texans 3, Dolphins 4. That would be my top 4 as well. And then be interesting to see how that AFC North figures in with the Steelers, with their quarterback situation. The Browns, can Deshaun Watson do anything correct this year and stay healthy?
Yeah.
Those are the two that usually we have
I
our
guess the
eyeballs on.
Bengals might be around 5. I think they are still upper echelon, but maybe a step, it's a hair back.
I agree. I agree. They lost Joe Mixon. Had just some different things going on. Burrow needs to stay healthy, of course. DJ Reader, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
gone. That division is probably going to be one of the most interesting to watch for sure.
Every
Because
year, man.
yeah, every single one of those teams can win 10 plus games. I feel like
Yeah.
9, 10 games. So
Yeah.
it will be interesting to see. It will be good. All right, this has been great. I got one last question for you. We'll keep it quick and we'll wrap it up. I was going to ask you most overrated and underrated NFL players. I'm going to change that because we're talking Houston here. Who is your favorite Texan of all time that's not named like Andre Johnson, J.J. Watt?
Oh man, that's a good question.
I know
Not
I
named
put you
Andre
on the spot
Johnson or
there.
JJ Watt. I mean, I guess could you go Arian Foster? Is that too close to
You
being?
could you could do it,
Uh,
but I'm trying to
okay.
stay away from the
You want me?
big the
You want
big
me to
big.
you want me to dig a little deeper? Okay.
It's tough.
Man, I don't know if it's. I guess you could factor in like personality and persona as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of great names that are kind of running through my brain right now. But Antonio Smith was a fun one.
Oh yeah. The
The ninja.
ninja.
Yeah, I guess I'll roll with that. I feel like
Yeah.
there's some actual players that I enjoyed more that I'm not talking about, but Jacoby Jones, RIP. I mean, he was a great player
He
for
was a
us,
really
and
great
obviously,
player.
it did kind of sour with that muff punt against Baltimore, but
I'll never
um,
forget that. But then
Yeah.
next year goes to Baltimore and takes one to the crib in the Super Bowl. Classic.
Made it sting that much worse, man.
Yeah, really did. RIP. Gone too soon. A few names come to my mind would be like Connor Barwin.
Yep.
This one's kind of more recent, but Kareem Jackson. Always loved him and Jonathan Joseph
KJ.
together.
I still like
KJ.
KJ, man.
Yeah, he was great. And deep, Owen Daniels was my guy. Tight
Oh
end.
yeah. Yeah.
He was an absolute stud.
You
So
could throw
those are
Kevin
just some,
Walter in there too.
yeah, Kevin Walter, classic. Those are just some guys that come to my mind. But my all-time favorite player is Andre, and then JJ, and nobody comes close to them.
Yeah, I mean they're pretty much a consensus 1 and 2, and it's debatable as who's 1 and who's 2.
That's
But
true.
that's
It's
that's
very
that's
true.
about where I got it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, there's one more thing I wanted to add. What was I gonna say?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't know. It slipped my mind. I was gonna say something
Here,
about.
I'll I'll
Oh,
I'll, I'll ramble on. Oh, go ahead.
just Hopkins. The way we did him dirty. I wanted him to come back so bad. I miss him so bad.
So I mean, I guess obviously I would have said him. I think him and Foster and Cushing would all kind of be in like,
I
hey,
I
besides
agree with
these,
you. I'm not gonna put
yeah,
him
yeah,
up there. Like I'm gonna put him up there in that
yeah,
label. Like we can't say them. Just that thought went through my mind. Like man, I missed DeAndre Hopkins.
yeah, and like what he did with how many quarterbacks was it? Like 10 or 12 quarterbacks, something
Something
crazy. It
ridiculous.
didn't matter who it was. Like the way his game was, he would just catch the ball regardless. I mean, that was awesome. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's kind of like him and JJ. You kind of like felt bad. I mean, he kind of felt bad we didn't get him what they deserve as far as winning wise. But
gotta feel bad for him, but hopefully now is the time for the winning to come. But Garrett, man, I appreciate you coming on. So glad we could just talk Texans ball, talk
of course, man.
preseason, upcoming season, and everybody go follow Garrett on his accounts that he plugged at the beginning of the episode. And yeah, man, love the stuff you're putting out, and hopefully we can keep in touch. And I'm sure we'll be keeping in touch over the season as it goes along, and we'll see how it goes. It's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me, and it's always fun talking ball with fellow Texans fans. But I would encourage you, just like I had that revelation. If you do have something reserving in the back of your mind to like fully, having you say what you believe, how good the team is, I would say let it go. It's a new team. That goes for all the fans out there. But I appreciate you, and you can call me anytime, and we'll be in touch. And I think it'll be a special year for us, man.
Absolutely,
So we
man.
we blessing.
That sounds great. We blessing, and hopefully we're not stressing. So,
We're stressing.
absolutely. But yes, absolutely. We'll keep in touch and go Texans this year, man. It's gonna be exciting. So, sounds great. But I appreciate you coming on. It's been a good time.
Yes, sir.